energy bills are rising at a historic rate, and there's no end in sight. Talk to enough people and you'll soon realize nearly everyone's shocked at their recent electricity bills. Some studies reveal energy costs have skyrocketed by as high as 60% in as little as 2 years. That's why tens of thousands are installing this magical little device from SavePowerBills.com to help slash their energy bills. This sophisticated gadget stabilizes electrical currents, reduces dirty electricity, and helps protect your appliances and electronics. Simply plug it into your home's wall outlet to help lower energy consumption and ultimately help reduce your power bills every month. Countless 5-star reviews back up the notion that this device is one of the most efficient ways to save money while beating the greedy power companies. But there's more. If you order now, you'll also receive 65% off, fast shipping within the USA, hassle-free returns, and last but not least, a 60-day satisfaction guarantee. Just go to SavePowerBills.com to take advantage of this limited time deal before they sell out. Once again, that's SavePowerBills.com.
I think the reality is that for centuries, we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good. And we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently.
No, we're not doing that. That's embarrassing.
So the woman you just heard right there going on an absolutely unhinged rant about how private property rights are absolutely terrible and we need to transform them into a collective good is a woman called Cea Weaver. And unfortunately, she is not a lady getting you to sign a petition outside of a Whole Foods before she goes back to her apartment to feed her 13 cats. She was recently appointed to the Advocate for Tenants position under New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. So this woman who is anti-private property rights, by the way, for racialized reasons, anti-white reasons, is going to be in a position of power crafting policy in the city of New York. And the Mamdani administration, when confronted with comments like this and far worse ones on social media, said, no, we reviewed her social media and we're absolutely sticking by her because, make no mistake about it, her desire to strip mostly white but also black and brown people of their property rights is a feature, not a bug. And if you don't believe that she said that, let me play the remainder of that clip.
Transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently. And it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
Now, look, we are going to go over the anti-white craziness that this woman has tweeted out repeatedly, that she's advocated for in multiple different interviews. But I just want to point out that this idea that private property rights are this great evil that we invented over the past couple of centuries is absurd, asinine, and ridiculous. In reality, for almost all of human history, we did not have broad recognition of private property rights. In fact, in many parts of the world, we still don't have that. It's only when we started recognizing property rights in certain modern Western countries that we went from a species where 90% of us lived in extreme poverty to a place and time where humans have never been more prosperous. And in fact, you can look at different various countries around the world that have gotten rid of private property rights, restored them later, and you could see that this is almost one-to-one a correlation with economic prosperity. And yet Cea Weaver is promising you the road to serfdom as a way to get back at Whitey because she's a stupid, unaccomplished, rich kid, spoiled brat who should never be put in a place of power in the first place. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
So I gotta give credit to a woman called Michelle Tandler who actually noticed that Cea Weaver was added to Zohran Mamdani's transition team and decided to start archiving her tweets in advance, knowing that this woman would end up deleting those tweets if she was appointed to a position in the Mamdani government. And make no mistake about it, that is exactly what Cea Weaver has tried to do. Cover up her past tweets, which are absolutely disgusting, reprehensible, and again, loaded up with anti-white racism. Let us just go over a couple so you can see what I'm talking about. From Cea Weaver, there's no such thing as a quote-unquote good gentrifier. Only people who are actively working on projects to dismantle white supremacy and capitalism, and people who aren't. Now, of course, many of you guys already know that no matter what you do as a white person, you're in fact an evil white racist. According to people like this, if you move out of a minority neighborhood, that is considered white flight, and that is in fact racist. If you move into a minority neighborhood, then guess what? That is considered gentrification, and that is in fact racist. But I want you guys to hold this tweet in your mind for a second, because we're going to circle back to it, Jen Psaki style, because there's an absolutely hilarious development in Cea Weaver's life from the Daily Mail that we got to cover in just a little bit. But let me just go a little bit more into the tweets that were archived by Michelle Tandler. Instead of blaming folks for not having access to a mortgage in a rich neighborhood, parentheses, and all that comes with that, we should tax the rich, invest in the public good, stop all evictions, and fund safe, stable public housing for everyone. Happy Mother's Day. Then she ends up advocating for rent control and public housing for everyone, and then she wants massive government interventions to solve gentrification. Now again, gentrification is just white people moving in. She happens to be very obsessed with that. Keep that in the back of your mind somewhere around nya, or maybe nya, because we will circle back on that a little bit later. But let us get into a couple of her other tweets, because at one point in time, she actually gives away the game. I agree, unless you're talking about rent control, which is a perfect solution to everything. And then she acknowledges that rent control actually destroys the housing market. Quote, I don't really disagree with this, but a couple of things. I think, quote, pass really strong rent control, end quote, is a more effective way to shrink the value of real estate than reducing rezoning applications, which have mixed results vis-a-vis property values. Now, of course, that is her acknowledging that rent stabilization and rent control, of which she is an advocate of, actually destroys property values, but does not actually produce housing, as she is replying to a tweet that relates to rezoning and building more housing, because again, these people's goal is to destroy the rich, not actually help the poor. Make no mistake about it. But again, we got more tweets from her. This country built wealth for white people through genocide, slavery, stolen land and labor. White supremacy built the North and the South. Private property, including and kind of especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy masquerading as wealth building public policy. Gentrification narratives are tired and not helpful anymore. Gentrification is caused by rent-seeking developers / landlords and policymakers that enable them. It is part of a centuries-long process of white supremacy in the housing / land market. Now, she also says, I endorse the No More White Men in Political Office platform, and she says she wants to impoverish the white middle class because homeownership is racist and failed public policy. Now, look, I'm going to link the entirety of this thread so you can go over all the different various crazy tweets from this woman for yourself. But when you have somebody whose goal is to impoverish the white middle class by destroying their private property rights, and by the way, said in that original clip that if she has to sacrifice the rights of black and browns in order to achieve that goal, this person should be basically on blue sky, tweeting into the wind or whatever they call it over there, not in a serious government position. But unfortunately, Cea Weaver has not only made it into the Mamdani administration, but she's had horrible impacts on New York State public policy, including backing that horrific rent control law, which does vacancy control, which basically removes incentives to actually repair units and has led to tens of thousands of units leaving the market. And by the way, she acknowledged in these various tweets that her goal is to drive down the property values and make these buildings insolvent so the public could take it over. So she's somebody who knew that the law that she advocated for was that disastrous. Now, in a previous video where I talked about a building that Zohran Mamdani had visited that was in fact financially unviable due to rent control and rent stabilization and a 2019 rent control law that the progressives like Mamdani ended up supporting in the state assembly and ended up passing into law, I mentioned briefly at the end of that video that Cea Weaver was appointed to this position as the news was breaking at the end of me shooting that video. Well, little did I know that from that video to today, what we end up finding out is that Cea Weaver was a chief lobbyist for the very law that made all these different various buildings insolvent. And considering her position is we should use rent control and rent stabilization not to help the poor, because
energy bills are rising at a historic rate, and there's no end in sight. That's why tens of thousands are using this amazing little device from SavePowerBills.com. It's a small but smart gadget that stabilizes electrical currents, reduces dirty electricity, and helps protect your electronics. Just plug it into your home's wall outlet to help lower energy consumption and ultimately help reduce your power bills every month. Order now to get 65% off plus many free bonuses before they sell out by going to SavePowerBills.com. That's SavePowerBills.com. Order now.
Remember, she wants to impoverish the white middle class, but as a way to drive down property values so that the government can take property values. Now you understand how she ended up being put in place in Mamdani's government. In addition to that, what we ended up finding out is that I shouldn't have wasted my time going through the bankruptcy filings, because the Mamdani administration admitted in court that it was in fact rent control and rent stabilization making the building insolvent in an effort to block the sale of these properties to keep them in the hands of the very landlord that Zohra Mamdani was calling a slumlord. Again, you no longer have to believe me and all the research that I did into the bankruptcy summary in that previous video, which by the way was stellar and you should definitely check it out. Believe the city of New York, because this is what they're saying in their own filing when they're trying to block this sale. Number 10 in their 6-page filing. Further, the city submits that the debtors and Summit have failed to demonstrate that the properties can support the proposed sale price and maintenance needs and costs given the regulated rent. HPD's preliminary internal analysis, based on information and belief, is that the proposed sale would not lead to a supportable business as long as the properties continued to have exclusively rent-stabilized or rent-controlled units, because the current rents are very low averaging. So here you have the pro-rent control, pro-rent stabilization Mamdani administration, when push comes to shove and they have to do court filings, acknowledging that the buildings would be fine, they'd be able to cover maintenance, but for the rent control and rent stabilization policies that Mamdani is an advocate for. So Cea Weaver has already had a disastrous impact on housing policy throughout the state of New York, but especially in the city of New York. And the idea that people are putting out there that these are just old tweets and therefore you shouldn't judge her is absolutely absurd and ridiculous, because this woman actually appeared on Majority Report about 9 months ago, still talking about how terrible it is that white people are able to move into historically minority neighborhoods in the borough of Brooklyn.
It's not as though every single, young white people woke up one morning and were like, you know what neighborhood looks good? Bed-Stuy,
Yeah.
There was no sort of collective decision on behalf of that class of people. The reality is that gentrification is bad for everybody. It's bad for older working class residents. It's bad for people who've been living in their neighborhood for a long time. It's bad for people who are looking to move to New York City for the first time. And it is something that has caused, like you said, really through real estate speculation. And I think rent stabilization and rent freeze are just such an important way to interrupt that cycle of speculation, displacement, and rising rents across the whole entire city.
Now, there's a couple of things about this interview that I found absolutely hilarious. The first and most obvious is that Emma Vigeland, the daughter of rich attorneys from New Jersey, a kid that was born on third base, went to a private elementary school that cost $40,000 a year. That's how much of a rich kid she was. Opens this up by saying that she's somebody who lives in a rent-stabilized apartment.
There are 2.4 million rent-stabilized tenants in New York City. I'm one of those folks, and this call here that you guys are getting behind is about a rent freeze for these rent-stabilized apartments.
Which, again, none of you should be surprised by this. These people who can absolutely afford to pay market rent, getting the discounts that are supposedly for the poorest. But what we find out is that these two women who are wringing their hands about evil white people moving into Brooklyn, the gentrifiers, are in fact the gentrifiers themselves. Because obviously Emma Vigeland, rich kid from New Jersey, living in a rent-stabilized apartment, probably in Brooklyn, let's be perfectly honest, probably in a historically minority neighborhood, taking advantage of that particular program. But guess what? Cea Weaver, also one of these individuals. It turns out that her mother actually owns a $1.4 million home in Nashville. She's a professor. But setting that aside for a moment, Cea Weaver's neighborhood of choice is Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Crown Heights is a historically black neighborhood, and this woman, who is not black, make no mistake about it, is bitching and moaning moaning about gentrification when she is in fact the gentrifier. And one of the funniest things about this is that the Daily Mail actually confronted her on the streets in her neighborhood, the neighborhood that she's gentrifying. And by the way, she was probably on her way to spend $25 at a frozen yogurt shop with Emma Vigeland to talk about the desperate need to fight against gentrification in their particular neighborhoods. But during the course of them trying to ask her questions, this new government official, about her family, about her being a gentrifier, about her anti-white people moving in posts, she ended up bursting into tears. Look at this woman's face. Look at the tears in this 37-year-old woman's eyes just from being confronted by a reporter because she's not ready for prime time. She's all fine and dandy going on all these different shows talking about how much she hates white people being able to move places, how much she wants to impoverish the white middle class, steal your property rights, incidentally take away the property rights from black and browns, but you know what? It's worth it for the cause of communism. But then when she's confronted on the streets after she was appointed to a serious government position, the tears start flowing. The waterworks. Let me get that clip of Emma Vigeland.
White woman fake crying thing. I could do it too, but
I'm so sick of these people. This is an activist who has done serious damage to not only the state of New York, but the city of New York with that rent control law that she advocated for at the statewide level. She's been appointed to a serious government position. She's all big when it comes to talking on social media about impoverishing the white middle class, as again, she comes from a wealthy white family or possibly Jewish family. I'm not good with the Jewish last names. Everybody give me a break, so it is possible. But then when she's confronted on the streets, oh, wow, the waterworks end up coming in. Oh my God, her life is so sad. How dare you confront this person that is supposed to be serving you on the things that she said and the beliefs that she's held throughout her entire life. Again, she's 37 years old. I've seen people posting about how you shouldn't hold this against her because she's just a young girl back in the day. It was only a couple of years ago. She was still in her late 20s, early 30s when she posted most of this crap. And the idea that we give you a free pass because she's a communist and therefore she must be brain damaged is absurd when she gets appointed to a government position. I mean, you have this guy called Shabazz Stewart, and he says, I've known Cea Weaver as a friend for nearly a decade. She is a good person and has done great work. No, absolutely not. She's done terrible work. It's fair to critique her past statements, but many, parentheses, not all of the things being said are crossing the boundaries into sexist bullying and cyberbullying. It's already really hard to attract good people into public service. The tone and tenor of some of the vitriol we are seeing, parentheses, which is often directed against women, will only make that exponentially harder. She is a professional activist and leech on our society who has done nothing but lobby for destructive policy after destructive policy. And by the way, her stated goal as she has been conducting her activism is to impoverish white people, the white middle class. She wants to take them down a page due to the fact that she's filled with racial hatred. So no, we're not going to talk about cyberbullying and people saying mean sexist things because she has one of those looks that you see among a lot of leftist women who advocate for these stupid ass policies. We are going to hold her to account. And by the way, we should hold the Mamdani administration to account for appointing this woman, even though again, this is the reason why they appointed her. This is why they wanted her on the team. They don't hate the fact that she hates white people. That's actually her number one qualification for the job. But now, of course, I leave this up to you guys out there in the audience. What do you think about Cea Weaver? And of course, the people crying about her cyberbullying. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me, the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about this absolute madness with Mamdani's appointment. Till next time.